It was just after nightfall on March 24, 1944. The Silesian air sat brittle and thin, the kind of cold that found its way under coats and into bones. Out beyond the double fences and floodlit watchtowers of Stalag Luft III, a stand of dark firs cut a black seam against the snow. Beneath the camp, 30 feet down where the ground held the day's chill like a vault, a man on his belly inched through a timbered tube that was barely wider than his shoulders. His elbows squeaked over polished boards, the lamp ahead glowed like a distant star. He stopped, listened. Above him the rhythmic sweep of a searchlight rolled across snow, the count he'd learned by heart. Then he pushed forward again, toward a trapdoor square of packed earth and freedom. Welcome back to Lore of the Multiverse, where true stories carry the voltage of myth. If you live for the moments history held its breath, subscribe and ring the bell. Tonight, you'll crawl through wood and sand with men who turned captivity into an engineering project, hope into a logistics plan, and defiance into a tunnel. This is the Great Escape, from the planning in the dirt under the fingernails to the sprint for the tree line, the manhunt that followed, and the cost written in blood. Stalag Luft III stood near the town of Sagan, now Zagan, Poland, run by the Luftwaffe for Allied aircrew. It was built to be escape-proof in ways that felt personal. The huts sat on raised pilings so guards could peer beneath for disturbed earth. The ground was a two-layer trap, a crust of yellow sand below a thin topsoil, so any digging stained clothes and shoes. A ring of raked, sterile, sand between double fences so one wrong step left a print as loud as a shout. Towers watched each compound. Microphones were sunk into the ground to eavesdrop on the earth itself. If you had to design a place whose purpose was to convince the captured that trying was pointless, you'd draw Stalag Luft III. They put pilots and navigators in there, the kinds of minds that look at problems and sketch solutions in the air. Among them was squadron leader Roger Bushell, a South African-born RAF officer they called Big X, tall, magnetic, calm under pressure. He'd already escaped from other camps. When he arrived at Stalag Luft III in 1943, he sketched something no one had dared. Not one tunnel, but three, codenamed Tom, Dick, and Harry, dug simultaneously so if the Germans found one, the work would shift to the others. The goal wasn't just individual freedom. It was strategic sabotage. Flood the German police state with so many fugitives that thousands of soldiers and cops would be pulled off the front to hunt them. A clandestine economy blossomed. Bedboards vanished by the hundreds and were replaced by fakes cobbled from scrap so the thefts wouldn't be noticed all at once. Electric cable fell off trucks and snaked into the ground to light the tunnels. Klim, powdered milk tins, precious contraband from Red Cross parcels, were hammered flat into scoops, then reborn again as airtight ventilation ducting. A bellows built from kit bags and tin kept air moving where the earth wanted to smother. Compasses were cast from melted phonograph needles, sight glasses cut from toothbrush handles. Maps were traced by hand from German timetables and smuggled tourist pamphlets. A tailor's shop appeared out of blankets and bedcovers dyed with cocoa and boot polish to pass as civilian coats. A document factory, led by gifted forgers like Lieutenant Tim Wellen, learned to mimic stamps, signatures, even the texture of official paper. And over it all, a network of stooges, lookouts posted at doors and corners, whistled coded warnings whenever a guard's boots came near. Dirt was the enemy and the currency. A man crawling 100 feet could bring back 2 buckets of the camp's yellow sand. A tunnel digging party might produce dozens per shift. You couldn't pile that up. It had to disappear. The answer was theater. Prisoners stitched small sacks that hung inside their trousers. Each penguin pinched a drawstring in his pocket, strolling the compound while a thin trickle of sand leaked into gardens, under floorboards, into the false ceilings of huts, beneath the camp theater's risers. You'd clap at a comedy skit and feel the stage boards float on an ocean of stolen earth. Tom took shape in the east compound. It was bold, straight, and hungry for wood. Then one afternoon German ferrets, the counter-escape specialists, followed a rumor and a trail of sawdust and found the vertical shaft. They hauled up boards stamped with German inventory numbers, lights, ducting, the works. The tunnel collapsed under the weight of boots and victory, and the mood in camp crashed with it. But Bushell had designed redundancies. Dick became a storage vault for forged papers, clothes, rations. Harry Doug from the North Compound, took the baton. A Canadian miner by trade, Wally Floody, the Tunnel King, taught men who had flown Lancasters and B-17s how to shimmy through packed earth and set timber like a Cornish pitman. Every job had a face and a heartbeat. There were scroungers who could coax parts from a wary German with a joke and a cigarette. There were stoics who could hold a post all day with a book and never look up while their ears never stopped listening. There were the men with hands that always seemed to know the next shape a tool should take. In a place where nothing belonged to you, craft and nerve became currency. By early March 1944, Harry stretched more than 300 feet toward the trees beyond the fence line, 40-odd feet down where the microphones wouldn't hear the diggers breathe. It had a trolley system, little wooden sleds on rails, to move men and sand. Dim bulbs flickered along the roof. The far end was capped by a trap of compacted snow and turf that hadn't seen sunlight since the first shovel bit. The plan had swollen with ambition. Not 24 men, not 50, but 200 would go, wave after wave through the night, every man with a forged identity, a cover story, a route, and rations. Fate made its first cruel edit during a roll call. The American airmen, who had provided brains and muscle to the plan, were suddenly transferred to a new compound. They would not be among the night's runners. Hollywood would later write them back into the legend. History kept them outside the tunnel on the night it mattered. March 24th brought a clear sky that turned to a knife after dusk. Snow squeaked under boots like powdered glass. Inside Hut 104, the entry hatch to Harry hid beneath a stove. A man slid the iron aside, lifted planks, and cool air breathed up from the dark. The first escaper wedged himself into the shaft and wriggled down into the grainy silence. One after another they dropped, hunched, looped their rations around their necks, then lay on the trolley and beckoned the next man to push. Then they hit the second cruel edit. The tunnel was short, by about 30 feet. When the lead man eased the end cap upward and peeked out, he was still inside the perimeter, just past the inner fence but shy of the tree line. The nearest watchtower could look straight down that strip of snow between the wire and the woods. Daylight would have made it impossible. At night, with timing and luck, it might still be done. They strung a telephone wire from the exit to a stooge inside the tunnel mouth, rigged a system of tugs and taps. The lookout lay on his belly at the exit, watching the searchlights swing. When the beam rolled away, he yanked twice, go. When it came back, 3 tugs, freeze. Minutes became an hour, then 2. A man stuck halfway when the tunnel's frozen walls swelled. Diggers inched past him, scraping at the bottleneck with tin scoops as his breath fogged the cold plank in front of his face. The bellows wheezed. Somewhere above, a tower guard stubbed a cigarette and stamped his feet to keep warm. Shortly after 2 in the morning, the system found a rhythm. A man's head popped up in white shadow. He scrambled to the woods and hugged the first trunk he found, then melted into darkness. They were ghosts on a schedule, one every 2 or 3 minutes. A pair in Czech railway caps, a Dutchman with a forged pass stamped just right, a Norwegian with a face that could be mistaken for a German laborer's if the light was kind, and Roger Bushell himself, a leader who had given others courage and now took his place among them. Number 76 wriggled out. A gust lifted a flap of snow from the trap. The watchtower beam paused. A sentry frowned, shouldered his rifle, then the night cracked with a shout. The alarm bell's iron tongue hammered the camp. Lights hit the woods and turned trees to bone. Harry, magnificent, fragile, illegal, became a funnel for hope and panic as boots thundered inside the hut above and German voices rolled like drums along the wire. 76 men out. 124 still waiting under the stove or squeezed into the tube. Guards sealed the hut, swarmed the shaft, dragged men up by their collars and dumped them on the snow. In the woods, muffled curses turned into longer strides. The first phase was over. The second began. The plan had spun a web across Germany and beyond. Some men carried tickets for local trains. Their forged papers presented them as foreign workers going home on leave, or as German soldiers in civilian clothes on special orders. They bought platform soup and kept their hats down. Others headed cross-country, compasses pointed at Sweden or Switzerland, at the Baltic harbors, at the far lines of a map where friendly flags still flew. Not everyone made a run for a border. Some aimed small, anywhere that was not a camp behind a fence. In Breslau, today Wrocław, a pair in overcoats bought third-class tickets and fell into the bone-deep tired sleep of honest travelers. A Feldgendarmerie sergeant asked to see their papers, their stomachs dropped, their forgeries held. In Frankfurt an der Oder, a man stood under a station clock and tried to look bored while a dog sniffed his trouser cuff and moved on. In Stettin, a fugitive bribed a sympathetic dockworker for a place in a barge's coal bunker. In snowbound fields south of Sagan, two trudged bareheaded past a farmhouse. An old woman at the window watched them pass, then quietly crossed herself. The German response was swift and total. Orders fanned out to police, soldiers, railway marshals, Gestapo and Kripo detectives. Roadblocks sprouted like thorns. Station masters were handed lists of criminal airmen. Posters promised rewards. They caught some with bad papers, some with good papers and bad luck, some because a policeman's bored eye snagged on a scuffed heel or the nervous way a man held his hat. Within days, most were back in cells, tired, angry, still humming with the adrenaline of the run. And then the story turned from boldness to horror. Adolf Hitler, briefed on the escape, raged. He wanted them all shot. Advisors cooled him to a number that still curdled the blood, 50. The machine that had checked tickets and knocked on doors now filled cars with handcuffed men, drove them down country roads and forest lanes, pulled over by ditches and quarries and the edges of fields. Papers after would say the same lie. Shot while trying to escape. The executions were scattered across the Reich so the killings would look like a collection of accidents. Names of the dead were relayed back to Stalag Luft III in drips and pauses as if to stretch the grief. 3 men made it home. The Dutch pilot Bram van der Stok reached Spain and then Gibraltar. His route would later read like a spy novel's itinerary. 2 Norwegians, Per Bergsland and Jens Muller, threaded Scandinavia's corridors and found Sweden's neutrality like a door in a wall. 73 did not. 50 of those were murdered in defiance of the Geneva Conventions, their ashes sent back to camp in urns stamped with quiet bureaucratic words. The survivors built a memorial for them in the woods near the exit of Harry, a stone amid trees that had watched men crawl and dash and die. The Great Escape did not shorten the war. It did not flood the German interior with hundreds of invisible saboteurs. Its success was too small measured in miles. Measured in meaning, it is enormous. In a system engineered to stamp out individuality, these men built a society that paid in patience and skill. They moved thousands of boards, hundreds of bulbs, tons of sand, and they did it one lifted plank, one scoop bucket, one stitched pocket at a time. They learned each other's hands and eyes until a glance could move a trolley or stop a lie at a gate. After the war, the Royal Air Force's Special Investigation Branch made a new kind of hunt its mission: find the men who killed the 50. They followed paper trails through ruins, knocked on doors that opened on faces with too much memory in the eyes, read reports typed by men who thought the Third Reich would exist forever and never imagined their paperwork would one day damn them. Trials at Hamburg and elsewhere convicted many of the Gestapo and police officers who had organized and carried out the murders. Some were hanged. It did not feel like balance. It felt like a promise kept. A book by Paul Brickhull, himself a former POW in the camp, made the story universal. A film amplified it. The motorcycle jump that millions remember never happened. Americans were transferred before the escape night. The real forged identities were humbler than Hollywood could bear. But the film got some things right: the camaraderie, the quiet jokes that hold men together when the world outside is cruel, the way a man can be brave and terrified in the same breath. What lingers is the soundscape. The scrape of a tin scoop inside a wooden tube. The sigh of bellows. The scuff of boots on hut floors. The rumble of a train over rails while 2 men pretend to belong. The crunch of snow under a guard's heel. The silence after a shot in a country lane. The shout of a tower guard at 2 in the morning, and the way that shout echoes across 76 small victories and 1 huge loss. You can stand there today, in the pines near Zagan, and put your hand on a stone where the names are cut deep. The woods are older, the light is the same gray softness it was that March night, and if you close your eyes you can almost hear the wire tug twice. Go, and taste the shock of cold air on a face that has been underground too long. This is lore of the multiverse. If this story moved you, If the nerve, craft, and cost of it landed, tap like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you carry away from Stalag Luft III. The audacity, the tragedy, or the stubborn, human refusal to let offense define a life. Until next time, keep your eyes open to the small hands that move big history, one board, one breath, one brave crawl at a time.